Good morning, Kansas City. Let's get ready to learn on KCPS Homeroom. I'm Justin Robinson, your homeroom instructor. Today is English Language Arts, or ELA Tuesday. First, we have a lesson for kindergarten through second grade, followed by a lesson for third through sixth, then secondary students. All right, again, first up, K through second grade. Are you ready to learn? Well, let's meet your teacher, Ms. Megan.
Good morning, I'm Megan and I'm a K through 2 ELA coordinator, and I'm going to be with you every Tuesday where we're going to be practicing different reading skills. Today, we're going to be reading a story called The Empty Pot by Demi, which is one of my favorite books. And we're going to be practicing a reading skill where we analyze characters' actions. So today, our focus is going to be, what does our characters' actions convey about them based on what they do, say, think, and feel. So while we analyze our main character's actions in The Empty Pot, we're going to be focusing on two questions today. What word best describes Ping? And how do Ping's actions impact the end of the text? We're going to be able to answer these questions because we're going to look at what Ping does, says, thinks, and feels. So while I'm reading the story today, I want you to be thinking about, what are the character's actions? What is Ping doing or saying or thinking or feeling? And those things are going to be conveyed in our text. And then because we'll be analyzing his actions, we'll be able to pick a word or maybe words that best describe him. Then we want to take a minute to think about, okay, I know Ping's actions, what he does, says, thinks, and feels, and how does that impact or affect what happens at the end of the story? Okay, so we're going to get started reading our book, and while I'm reading, I want you to be thinking about these things. Okay, let's get started. The Empty Pot by Demi. A long time ago in China, there was a boy named Ping who loved flowers. Anything he planted burst into bloom. Up came flowers, bushes, and even big fruit trees, as if by magic. Everyone in the kingdom loved flowers too. They planted them everywhere, and the air smelled like perfume. The emperor loved birds and animals, but flowers most of all, and he tended his own garden every day. But the emperor was very old. He needed to choose a successor to the throne. Who would his successor be? And how would the emperor choose? Because the emperor loved flowers so much, he decided to let the flowers choose. The next day, a proclamation was issued. All the children in the land were to come to the palace. There, they would be given special flower seeds by the emperor. Whoever can show me their best in a year's time, he said, will succeed me to the throne. The news created great excitement throughout the land. Children from all over the country swarmed to the palace to get their flower seeds. All the parents wanted their children to be chosen emperor, and all the children hoped they would be chosen too. When Ping received his seeds from the emperor, he was the happiest child of all. He was sure he could grow the most beautiful flower. Ping filled the flower pot with rich soil. He planted the seed in it very carefully. He watered it every day. He couldn't wait to see it sprout, grow, and blossom into a beautiful flower. Day after day passed, but nothing grew in his pot. Ping was very worried. He put new soil into a bigger pot. Then he transferred the seed into the rich, black soil. Another 2 months he waited, but still nothing happened. By and by, the whole year passed. Spring came, and all the children put on their best clothes to greet the emperor. They rushed to the palace with their beautiful flowers, eagerly hoping to be chosen. Ping was ashamed of his empty pot. He thought the other children would laugh at him because for once he couldn't get a flower to grow. His clever friend ran by, holding a great big plant. "Ping," he said, "you're not really going to the emperor with an empty pot, are you? Couldn't you grow a great big flower like mine?" "I've grown lots of flowers better than yours," Ping said. "It's just, this seed won't grow." Ping's father overheard this and said, "You did your best, and your best is good enough to present to the emperor." Holding the empty pot in his hands, Ping went straight away to the palace. The emperor was looking at the flowers slowly, one by one. How beautiful all the flowers were! But the emperor was frowning and did not say a word. Finally, he came to Ping. Ping hung his head in shame, expecting to be punished. The emperor asked him, "Why did you bring an empty pot?" Ping started to cry and replied, "I planted the seed you gave me and I watered it every day, but it didn't sprout. I put it in a better pot with better soil, but it still didn't sprout. I tended to it all year long, but nothing grew. So today I had to bring an empty pot without a flower. It was the best I could do." When the emperor heard these words, a smile slowly spread over his face, and he put his arm around Ping. Then he exclaimed to one and all, "I have found him! I have found the one person worthy of being emperor. Where you got your seeds from, I do not know, for the seeds I had given you had all been cooked, so it was impossible for any of them to grow. I admire Ping's great courage to appear before me with the empty truth, and now I reward him with my entire kingdom and make him emperor of all the lands." The end. Wow, I love that book. Isn't it a great story? So now I want to go back to my board and talk about what are Ping's actions in the story. So we're going to be looking to answer our question, what word best describes Ping? And there may be more than one word, or as I call them, character trait that we could use to describe Ping. Now, I'm going to pick one word and you may come up with a different word. But remember, it needs to be based on his actions, what he does, says, thinks, and feels in our text. So as I was reading, I'm thinking, he gets the flower, it doesn't grow. He tries to water the seed over and over again, still doesn't grow. He then switches it to a new pot, puts new dirt in it, still isn't growing, but he doesn't give up. So when I hear those actions, I start to think that he's dedicated, right? He's committed to getting this flower to grow so he could become emperor. The next thing I'm thinking about when I'm analyzing his actions is the things that he says. And Ping shows that he's dedicated and committed to this by the things that he says to the emperor. And when he goes to him at the end of the story, he brings him that empty pot because he knows that's what he needs to do, even though it's not a big, beautiful flower. So again, he's committed to this project and this task that the emperor gives him, which to me shows his dedication. Now, you may come up with words like truthful or honest to show the word that best describes Ping. But I'm going to go with my word dedicated. Our second question that we should be thinking about while we are reading is, how do Ping's actions impact or affect what happens at the end of our text or our story? So at the end, Ping ends up being declared emperor because of his dedication and his honesty throughout the story. So when he stays dedicated with his actions by the things that he does, says, thinks, and feels, in the end, he comes out on top because he was honest and brought the emperor the empty truth. So, going back to my question, how do his actions impact the end of the text? Ping's actions of sticking with it and making sure that he tries his best to be honest with the seed that the emperor give him to grow the best flower, in turn, give him the results of becoming emperor. So, next week when we read together, we're going to be analyzing a new character, and I want you to be thinking about that character's actions and some of the things that that character does, says, thinks, and feels, and how it impacts our story next week. We'll also be practicing a different reading strategy that you can apply to any book that you're reading at home or in school. I hope you enjoyed reading The Empty Pot, and I look forward to seeing you next week to read our new story. Have a great day.
Thank you, Miss Megan. See you next week. Next up for today, Miss Antal with 3rd through 6th grade English. Everyone, let's get ready to learn.
Hi, my name is Mimi Antal. Today I'm going to teach you how to ask questions. Now, when we talk about asking questions, we're not talking about just when you're listening to a story, but also when you're reading independently. So you're going to have a chance to practice this at home. But when I say asking questions, you might wonder to yourself, why is that important? Well, asking questions matters because it allows us to linger with the text. When we ask questions, we can involve ourselves more in what we're reading. And even more importantly than that, when we ask questions, it increases our ability to understand what we're reading. It increases our comprehension. Now today I'm going to demonstrate for you how to do that. But before I do so, I want you to take a moment, see if you can grab a piece of paper or a pencil, or even maybe someone you can share your ideas or thoughts with. I'll give you a minute to do that. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Okay, so if you remember, today we're asking questions, and one of the things I need for you to understand before we get started is that not all questions are alike. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I like to pretty much categorize questions into 2 different areas. They include what I would call thin questions and thick questions. Now, clearly there are many other types of questions you can use, but for our purposes today, let's stick to these 2. Okay, here we go. I'm going to explain what I mean by thin and thick. Let's start with thin questions. Thin questions are questions that you can typically find the answer right in the text. It doesn't require a lot of thinking. Oftentimes, these questions start with words like where, when. I've also noticed a lot of times with these thin questions, the answers also are very simply a yes or a no. But not all questions are thin questions. Do you remember what I just called the other type? Well, you might be thinking thick. If you are, good for you. Okay, so thick questions. Thick questions are questions that you can't find directly in the text. You have to actually find them here and think deeply. These questions often start with words like why or what if. My favorite is I wonder. Thick questions, sometimes you might have to search around in the text to give yourself a little bit of information or background knowledge, but the answers still come from here. Let me give you an example. Today for our demonstration, we're going to read a little bit from the Watsons Go to Birmingham. In this book, a thin question just before I even begin to read might be, how many people are going on this trip? I could simply count up the number of people and tell you how many, but a thick question would be, how come? Before we get started though, I want to tell you a little bit about how I'm going to do the demonstration. So I mentioned earlier that I'm going to do a think aloud. You may already know what a think aloud is. Let me explain. Now, doing a think aloud is going to be a lot more complicated for me than for you. Ordinarily, thoughtful readers are always asking themselves questions, but they don't ask them aloud. It's going on in their mind constantly. But in order for me to demonstrate this in a way that you can later practice, I'm going to have to do it out loud. That's why we call it a think aloud. I'm going to describe for you what I'm thinking as I'm reading. One last thing before I get started. I'm going to demonstrate this read aloud, or rather think aloud, and as I read, I'm going to have you do one of two things. Either one, you're going to tell me, or someone near you, what type of question I'm using, thin or thick. And as time goes on, you'll get an opportunity to actually start thinking of those questions yourself. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and get started with our book today. It's called The Watsons Go to Birmingham. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier was when can you ask questions? Thoughtful readers are always asking questions about the text that they're involved with. You can ask questions before, during, or after reading the text. I know for myself personally, looking at this book, I have a lot of questions already. Do you have any as of yet? The interesting thing too about chapter books is if you have questions about what the book is about, you can oftentimes read a brief synopsis of it. Paperbacks, such as this book, as you can see the cover is very soft. Paperbacks often have a synopsis located on the back of the book. Sometimes on hard books, it's on the inside cover. So before I get started, I'm actually going to read the synopsis on the back. That'll give me an opportunity to already start beginning to ask questions, and it will also give you an opportunity to know a little bit more about what the book will be about. Here on the back, it says, enter the hilarious world of 10-year-old Kenny and his family, the weird Watsons of Flint, Michigan. Stop. Listener, have you already developed a question? I have. Okay, I'll share the question, what I'm thinking. Why are they called the Weird Watsons? Thick or thin? What kind of question was that? If you said thick, you are exactly right. When I'm asking a question such as why, that's requiring me as a reader to think more deeply. I'm going to keep reading now. So back to the paragraph. There's Mama, Dad, little sister Joetta, that's an interesting name, and brother Byron, who's 13 and an official juvenile delinquent. I can't wait to read about that. When Mama and Dad decided it's time for a visit to Grandma, Dad comes home with amazing Ultra Glide. Ooh, question. What's an Ultra Glide? Thin or thick? Yeah, you're right. It's probably a thin question. I could probably find the answer right in the text. And the Watsons set out on a trip like no other. They're heading south. They're going to Birmingham, Alabama, to one of the darkest moments, in America's history. I wonder why the author refers to it as America's darkest moments. Thin or thick? Definitely a thick question. So did you notice what I did? As I was reading, I slowed down and I became more involved with the text by asking questions. I've set a purpose for my reading, and even more importantly, I'm now understanding very clearly what this is about. Hopefully you'll try this out and you'll see and notice that your level of understanding or comprehension goes up as well. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into the text. The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. Chapter 1. And you wonder why we get called the Weird Watsons. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days that when you breathed out, your breath kind of hung frozen in the air like a hunk of smoke. And you could walk along and look exactly like a train blowing out big, fat, white puffs of smoke. Stop. I wonder if the narrator likes the cold. Thin or thick? Exactly, thick. Back to the text. It was so cold that if you were stupid enough to go outside, your eyes would automatically blink 1,000 times, like all by themselves, probably so the juice inside of them wouldn't freeze up. Okay, I guess he doesn't like the cold. It it was so cold that if you spit, the slob would be an ice cube before it hit the ground. It was about a zillion degrees below zero. It was even cold inside our house. We put sweaters and hats and scarves and 3 pairs of socks on and still were cold. The thermostat was turned all the way up and the furnace was banging and sounding like it was about to blow up, but it still felt like Jack Frost had moved in with us. All of my family sat real close together on the couch under a blanket. Dad said this would generate a little heat, but he didn't have to tell us this. It seemed like the cold automatically made us want to get together and huddle up. My little sister, Joetta, sat in the middle, and all you could see were her eyes because she had a scarf wrapped around her head. I was next to her, and on the outside was my mother. Stop. Okay, listener, here's another question. My little sister, what is her name? Thin or thick question? Exactly. I can find the answer right in the text. Here it says, my little sister Joetta. Okay, I'm going to continue reading, but now I'm going to change things up a little bit. As I continue to read, I want you to think of questions. So if you remember earlier, I suggested that you get a paper and a pencil or pen so you can jot down some questions. Now, you don't necessarily have to write it down. If you can think of it and keep it in your head, you can even share it with another person. I'll pause after a little bit to give you an opportunity to do just that. So, listener, as I'm reading, I want you to ask yourself questions as you become more involved with the text. Are you ready? Okay, let's try it out. Mama was the only one who wasn't born in Flint, so the cold was coldest to her. All you could see were her eyes, too, and they were shooting bad looks at Dad. She always blamed him for bringing her all the way from Alabama to Michigan, a state she called a giant icebox. Dad was bundled up on the other side of Joey, trying to look at anything but Mama. Next to Dad, sitting with a little space between them, was my older brother, Byron. Byron had just turned 13, so he was officially a teenage juvenile delinquent and didn't think it was cool to touch anybody or even let anyone touch him, even if it meant to freeze to death. Byron had tucked the blanket between him and Dad down into the cushion of the couch to make sure he couldn't be touched. Stop. Okay, listener, I want you to take a moment, share the question that you came up with. Okay, let's come back together. Are you starting to think a little bit deeper about the text? Let's continue. I'm actually enjoying this. Dad turned on the TV to try to make us forget how cold we were, but all that did was get him in trouble. There was a special news report on Channel 12 telling about how bad the weather was, and Dad groaned when the guy said, "If you think it's cold now, wait until tonight. The temperature is expected to drop into record low territory, possibly reaching the -20s. In fact, we won't be seeing anything above zero for the next 4 or 5 days. He was smiling when he said this, but none of the Watson family thought it was funny. We all looked over at Dad. He just shook his head and pulled the blanket over his eyes. Stop. Go ahead once again, take a moment to share a question that you may have. Okay, let's come together again, listener. Back to the text. Then the guy on TV said, "Here's a little something we can use to brighten our spirits and give us some hope for the future. The temperature in Atlanta, Georgia is forecast to reach..." Dad coughed real loud and jumped off the couch to turn the TV off, but we all heard the weatherman say, "the mid-70s. The guy might as well have tied Dad to a tree and said, "Ready, aim, fire!" "Atlanta," Mama said. "That's 150 miles from home. Oh, so close." "Walona," Dad said. "I knew it," Mama said. "I knew I should have listened to Moses Henderson." Who? I asked. Dad said, "Oh, Lord, not that sorry story. You've got to let me tell about what happened with him." Mama said, "There's not a whole lot to tell, just a story about a young girl who made a bad choice. But if you do tell it, make sure you get all the facts right." We all huddled as close as we could because we knew Dad was going to try to make us forget about being cold by cutting up. Me and Joey started smiling right away. Stop. Reader, I just came up with a question. I'm going to slow down again and I'm going to go ahead and ask it out loud. Who's Joey? Now, I'd like for you to try to answer that question before we move on because it's very important to understanding the story and what's happening. Who do you think Joey is in the story? Could it be a nickname? Yeah, I think so too. My understanding is that Joey is a nickname for Joetta. Okay, let's go ahead and return back to the text. "Kids," Dad said, "I almost wasn't your father. You guys came real close to having a clown for a daddy named Hambone Henderson." Daniel Watson, you stop right there. You're the one who started that Hambone nonsense. Before you started that, everyone called him by his Christian name, Moses. And his respectable boy, too. He wasn't a clown at all. But the name stuck, didn't it? Hambone Henderson. Me and your granddaddy called him that because the boy had a head shaped just like a ham bone, had more knots and bumps on his head than a dinosaur. So as you guys sit here giving me these dirty looks because it's a little chilly outside, ask yourselves if you'd rather be a little cool or go through life being known as Hambone. It's me and Joey cracked up. Byron kind of chuckled and Mama put her hand over her mouth. She did this whenever she was going to give a smile because she had a great big gap between her front teeth. If Mama thought something was funny, first you see her trying to keep her lips together to hide the gap. Then, if the smile got to be too strong, you see the gap for a hot second before Mama's hand would come up to cover it. Then she'd crack up too. Stop. Okay, listener, go ahead, take a moment to either write down a question or share one you had while I was reading it aloud. Okay, back to the text. Laughing only encouraged Dad to cut up more. So when he saw the whole family thinking he was funny, he really started putting on a show. He stood in front of the TV. "Yep, Hambone Henderson proposed to your mother around the same time I did. Fought dirty too. Told your mama a pack of lies about me. And when she didn't believe them, he told her a pack of lies about Flint." Stop. Listener, at this point in the story, I want to share something with you. As we continue to read, you're going to notice that there's going to be some language in the text that is quite a bit offensive. I'm going to read it anyway, and here's the reason why. First of all, I'd like for you to understand that not everything we read, we agree with. That's important to know. Sometimes it's because of the time period when the author was writing the text. Sometimes it might be because the author is trying to bring across a specific tone of a character. So even though we don't necessarily agree with everything a character might say or do, it sometimes does still add to the story and understanding. So especially as I read this section, I really want you to be thinking very deeply about what's happening in the story. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Dad started talking Southern style, imitating this Hambone guy. "Well, Lona, I heard tell about the weather up that far north in Flint, Michigan. Heard it's colder than inside an icebox. Seen a movie about it. Think it was made in Flint. Movie called Nanook of the North. Yep. Do you believe a show was made in Flint? Flint, Michigan. Folks there live in these things called igloos. According to what I seen in these here movie, most of the folks in Flint is Chinese. Don't believe I seen nan one colored person in the whole dang city. You a Bama gal. Don't believe you be too happy living up in no igloo. Ain't got nothing against them. Don't believe you be too happy living amongst a whole slew of Chinese folks. Don't believe you like the food. Only thing them Chinese folks in that movie ate was whales and seals. Don't believe you like no whale meat. Don't taste a whole lick like chicken. Don't taste like pork either. Stop. Okay, so listener, I want you to ask some questions. Go ahead and jot them down or share them with someone else in the room that might be nearby. And remember what I said about the sort of things that you hear in the text and whether you agree or disagree with them. Okay, before going back to the text, I have to first apologize because I'm clearly not giving you enough time to really have good discussions about these types of things. But what I do want to give you is an opportunity to learn another way of connecting with the text so that you can go into your own reading today independently and start doing and acting out these things for yourself. Start asking these questions. Okay, let's read one last little bitty section before we stop for the day. Back to the text. It says, Mama pulled her hand away from her mouth. Daniel Watson, you are one lying man. Only thing you said that was true was that being in Flint is like living in an igloo. I knew I should have listened to Moses. Maybe these babies might have been born with lumpy heads, but at least they'd have warm, lumpy heads. You know, Birmingham is a good place. And I don't mean just the weather either. The life is slower. The people are friendlier. Yeah? Dad interrupted. They're laugh a minute down there. Let's see. Where was the colors only bathroom? Downtown? Daniel, you know what I mean. Things aren't perfect, but people are mostly honest. They're more honest even about the way they feel. She took her mean eyes off Dad and put them on Byron. And folks there do know how to respect their parents. Byron rolled his eyes. He didn't care. All he did was tuck the blanket further into the couch's cushion. I think we'll stop there for today. So remember, as you're reading a text, you want to take your time to ask questions. Do you remember why? Most importantly, I think it allows us to really enjoy the text as we get involved with what we're reading. But also asking questions helps to increase our comprehension, our understanding of the text. So today, I want you to try it. Asking questions, increasing our comprehension. Thank you for tuning in this week, and I can't wait to see you back again. Today we talked about asking questions. I think the next time we meet, we'll start talking about how to answer those questions. It was great being with you today, and happy reading.
Thank you, Miss Antal. We will see you next week. Now, it's secondary time. Middle and high schoolers, let's get ready to learn with Mr. Odom.
Good morning, Kansas City. My name is Chris Odom. I'm the secondary ELA coordinator. I'm going to start working with you some mornings here and talking about some reading strategies that you can apply throughout the year to keep yourself up to speed on all the things you're going to be asked to do. One thing we're going to talk about are inferences and drawing conclusions. This is something that you will certainly use throughout the rest of your reading and writing career well into your adult life. So one reason I really think it's an excitement to talk about is how to get you invested and involved in what you see and read. So we're going to give you one strategy today we're going to use. It's called See, Think, Wonder. Today to participate, we're going to really work on defining inference and drawing some conclusions. We're going to use this See, Think, Wonder structure, put you to doing an activity with us today, and we're going to ask you to discuss at home. So if there's somebody at home that you want to grab real quick to do this activity with, the idea would be to have a collaborative conversation with your peers, with your friends. You guys could get on the phone. We used to do that a lot. You could also maybe grab a family member. We're going to try to chart something, so if you want to have a small piece of paper or your favorite electronic device, I think that would be a perfect way for you to chart your thinking while we participate together today. Also, to leave us, we're going to try an exit ticket and see if you really have some new ideas about what it means to make an inference, or maybe some questions that you could send me that we could talk about in a future session. Okay, let's define inference. An inference, it's a noun, It's a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. What is evidence? What is reasoning? Okay, so you're going to need to be able to say how you came to the conclusion that you did and what you based your conclusion on. That's the basis of making an inference. So we're going to draw some conclusions about what we think is happening in a really neat feature that's in the New York Times throughout the whole school year. New pictures come out every Monday, and students across the country write in, kind of like in a Twitter format, and guess about what they say is happening. Later in the week on Wednesday, the news article will come out and it'll tell you exactly what it was about. And it's another strategy to build interest and to get students across the country talking about what makes things newsworthy or why it would have appeared in the New York Times at all. Okay, so let's get started. The chart that you will want to build would look something similar to this. This is a whole piece of paper. On the far column, you could just say you see. In the middle, you could think. And on the far side, you could wonder. In the best case scenario, you would take one thing you see and put it in the next column also and say what you think about what you see. And then you would put it in the final column and you would say what you wonder about what you think and about what you see. So I will show you an example here in a minute, and we're all going to start it up together. We won't be able to pause for as long as we would want to because we are live, and I can't sit here and do nothing with you for very long. But we may be able to have you go back and see again and have this conversation as this might be recorded and put some other places. Okay, finally we're going to go into the wrap-up. So be ready to tell me after we do this activity together what you learned about an inference, 2 things you're not quite sure about making an inference, and 1 thing you want to know more about if we come back together. Okay, I'm going into this link and we're going to have some fun with this picture. I'm going to explore it live like it is on the web and show you how you could find your way around in the event that you have this at home too. So you'll see here, this is the picture we're going to look at. But if I scroll a little bit down below, I want to show you 2 things. Right here, 679 students have chimed in. This was at the end of last school year, and said what they think the picture's about. We're going to look at those in a minute, but first we're going to have you participate. I'm also going to go down here and see the questions. So we're going to talk about what is going on in this picture. Like you could put that in the C. We're going to talk about what do you see that makes you say that. Again, that sounds like it could go in the C. It could probably go in the think. It could probably go in the wonder. Okay, and what more can you find? One really fun thing for me as I was growing up was challenging myself and the other people around me to find things in the readings and find things in our life that maybe other people didn't see. I had a best friend that we were always really excited when we could find something that nobody else knew was there, and we were really proud of that. One strange thing is he didn't really consider himself to be very school-like, but he was always so aware of what was going on. If we went into an environment, into a room, he knew exactly how it felt to be in that room and how we should all act. So his level of perception that we call intuition is really something that we're trying to build in every reader. And in order to build intuition, we make predictions. Okay, so I'm giving you lots of options, and let's go back now and let's check out this image. I'm going to pop it up here for you, and we're going to go ahead and say what we see, we think, and we wonder. Okay, so here is that image. Take it all in. Look for things that you think might point to what this meaning of this image might be, or why it might have appeared in the newspaper in the first place. What clues do you see that might tell you some things about what is going on in the world around us? These balloons seem awfully significant if you have not noticed them. What is this door telling you, and why are the people so eager to get inside or keep the people inside that might be in there? What have all these signs seem to be about? Are there more signs there than there used to be? Are these different signs than we are used to seeing, or is it becoming part of our everyday life that we see signs everywhere we go? Okay, so I hope now you've started to see something. Let's put one down together. I see men and women wearing masks. Okay, from that, I think this was probably during a time where we have learned about what best to do during COVID. I wonder, really, how long they've been out there. And I think I know where they're going. but I'm going to wait and let you try to guess and tell me when we read some of the student comments. Okay, so if I could hear you right now, I bet you'd be saying some great things you see, think, and wonder. Let's have those conversations at home while I pull up what the other students across the country might have said about this picture. Okay, let's take a look and see what some of the students thought throughout the world when they saw this article first appear in the newspaper. And remember, you can always come back and see these discussions later online with your friends and family. So one student here sounds like Julia from Milton says, it looks like some black people, maybe a family, are wearing masks and are holding balloons. The balloons say Happy Mother's Day, so maybe the people are visiting the mother who is in a nursing home during COVID. The people are crowded around the doorway. Okay? We're going to hope that Julia doesn't mean any harm in her phraseology about some black people. Again, we're interpreting and understanding comments that we see from other people and other people's interpretations. So sometimes we have to be ready to digest or think about things we may not agree with. Okay, here's a student that says, I think they're at a hospital waiting to visit people that's been sick. They're giving out balloons. Okay, another really good guess. It seems like a group of family and friends gathered together to surprise someone who is sick for Mother's Day. Okay, I like that guess, and that we're seeing a family here, right? And maybe there's some closeness that seems like maybe everyone's so close to each other, maybe they're family. But it would be neat to ask that student, what did you use to make that conclusion? And how did you come to the decision that the people in this picture might be family? It looks like people are trying to see inside. There's a new baby being born. That's a fun guess. I would say we might have to zoom in a little closer on the balloons. Or maybe there is a baby being born and this is just a different way to recognize it, and it's a new mother, right? But when we look at those balloons, notice how many people start commenting about how much they tell you why we're there and when we're there. The other neat thing is that when you look at what date it was published, it's right around Mother's Day. So a lot of the people who were going ahead and making these guesses, it was because of the time of year that they would immediately come to that conclusion about why it was in the newspaper. If you saw this now, you could see how you'd really need to read the text. So let's talk about what we're doing here. Is it getting more interesting? Would you rather now read an article about why these people are waiting in line to go into a retirement home to welcome and see people they haven't seen in a while during COVID? Probably, because now we've digested and thought about the image, and it's given us a chance to conquer something that we call the productive struggle. And sometimes when people are asked to read newspapers or informational text, we decide that it's not as cool and fun and interesting as some of the other things that we read for more an entertainment value. The problem with that is there's so much good information that we need to learn and digest about our world, and really it's sometimes even more interesting what really happens than the things that are entirely made up or make-believe. So I would encourage students to really start to find these strategies. The first thing is, see what you think that image is telling you about. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Start turning on those muscles, like my best friend when I was growing up, who didn't know that he had those muscles and they could be for school. He really used them mostly for not school. But the neatest thing is if he needed them, he could excel in that same way right there in the classroom and see, think, and wonder using his knowledge of the world and life that other people were not sure that he possessed. So I would encourage you again, let's see that side of you. Let's get those muscles moving so that when you're making some inferences and you're drawing some conclusions about what you see, then again, we hear and start to understand how your interest is building and your fascination with the world that you're a part of. The final thought I wanted to give you is really just what this was about, and we can read a little bit at the bottom, and which is really fun, that we've answered these questions. This is called the reveal. This week's image comes from the May 11th article, After Months Apart, Mother's Day Visits Through a Doorway. What's unbelievable is now that you're so excited about this image, you could go in here at home and we could click and read on that article. The story details the scene of the Los Angeles nursing home on Mother's Day. Families, there's one of those guesses, got their first chance to see mom since the coronavirus lockdown began, as long as they stayed outside and she stayed in. Okay, so this has been our chance to review and talk about inferences. It's been a chance to think about how to make a see, think, wonder chart. It's been a chance for us to talk about how to get those muscles spinning and moving so that when you're using them every day in the classroom, it's going to lead to a strong future and you're going to have an unbelievable experience as an adult and potentially someone who loves college. So again, let's try thinking about our strategy to get us back out of here. Are there 3 things you now know about making an inference? Did you think of it in a different way now that we used an image to start the process? Could you also apply making an inference to something you read? Is it the same kind of a process? Does it take a little more energy than just letting it sit there? Do you have to go to the image in order for it to mean something? Is this a lot like what happens when you sit and read? Okay, are there 2 things you're not too sure about? Are there things that you would wonder? How does an inference work? How do I get credit for this in my class? Can I do this assignment with my friends? Oh man, I hope so. And is there one thing you want to know more about making an inference? I want to know what image you would pick from this website. And if you get a chance, send me an email. I'm codom@kcpublicschools.org, and I would love for you to send me something that you think we should all talk about. It could be from the New York Times. It could be another image that you think other students would want to guess and find interesting. Thank you so much for your time. In the next session, we'll explore some more reading strategies and probably keep exploring inferences and drawing conclusions. Good morning, Kansas City. My name is Chris Odom. I'm the secondary ELA coordinator for the Kansas City Public Schools. And today we're going to start the first of many series about the writing process and start you thinking about ways that you can be prepared for the tasks your teachers might ask of you this year. Before I even go anywhere on this slide, I want to point out this part in parentheses because I added this part out of respect to one of my favorite English teachers when I was in school. And since we're going to say that, we might as well mention her name was Elaine Schlossman. And at Lincoln Prep, here in Kansas City Public, she really helped me understand, before we ever even got anywhere with our writing, that you really kind of need to develop some ways to figure out what you're doing before you spend all your time writing. And some things like that really could have saved me and helped me master my own way to come up with my own direction and not get stuck and not have one at all. So after working with students for a long time, I would say really your main goal that I've noticed before you really ever start writing is figuring out what you're doing. And sometimes I've seen students figure out what they're doing simply just by starting. And that might look like they even turned in that draft of writing, the first one that they ever really started. And so today I'm going to try to show you a better way that might help you use that same strategy, but also turn it into something different than you might have realized it would be by the end. Okay, so doing that, just jumping in, is really what you want to do, all right? But it's not what you want to do as your final product. So today, we're going to talk about the power of pre-writing. And pre-writing could be as small as making lists. The first one I really love to do, and I do all the time, my entire life, including my adulthood, is make lists. And they help me with my week, they help me with my job, they are a constant need for me to have a post-it note. I have them in my phone. These are not just grocery lists, but sometimes these are things that I'm pondering or need to figure out. It's also kind of fun to then go back to these lists and really see, if you feel like you've accomplished something. Okay, there's another one that I really love that I learned from psychology teachers called free association thinking. And there's really not a lot of rules here other than you get loose. And one thing I've learned over the course of my life, that's why I love sometimes doing presentations, is that I can get there and I can lower my inhibitions and worries enough to speak, and to speak sometimes fluidly with purpose in the moment. This is not something that I did the moment I started my education, but it is something that I learned to channel through something you might even call free association. I also play jazz. I'm not bragging, but it's something that I love to do because it lets me loosen up and find things that I didn't know were even part of my innards. When I play music, it feels like writing, but it doesn't have any words. especially when you play music with other people and you're in a group and you're all free associating and making up things and riffing off each other. I would say this is the power and the magic of the brain and what brainstorming can really do, right? If you've wondered how do these artists just play endlessly, they've found a way somehow to stop censoring their thinking and climb over their inhibitions. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm also going to help you maybe develop a research question that could lead your study if you're asked to do this. I was one of the teachers, and I still want to be, that always ask students, what's your topic? And develop it. Developing a topic is actually one of the standards. And knowing how to make it go further than just a word. How to make it sound like it's really a research paper. And when you're doing a research paper, my favorite teacher of research told me, research is never over, that's why it starts with the word re. Or at least the part of the word re. Because you do it again and again and again. So I'm going to try to model a topic for you today too that I am currently researching. Okay, so brainstorming. Let's say you're in a class, you need some ideas about what to write about. The first thing you want to do is not just limit yourself to this little time to make this list. You'll have forever to make this list, but for a moment, put a ton of pressure on yourself and say, I'm going to make a list for 10 minutes. And I'm going to stop writing at 10 minutes. I'm going to put stuff on the list that I don't think is fun or interesting, but I'm just going to use it, and I'm going to jump over it, and I'm going to go to the next thought. If you do that, again, like I'm saying, you're going to pass up your indecision. You're going to start to have some options. Think about when you're in a restaurant. I use this example a lot with my students. And you've been looking at the menu, but suddenly the waiter's there, and you're blank. And you're just under so much pressure that you're going to pick anything. And then the thing that you pick you really didn't want, right? Modern day solution is get online and really study a lot before you got there so that when you sit down, you know exactly what you wanted, right? But there's another challenge that your brain is making present because stress came back in. So put a lot of stress on yourself, make a list, and then realize that was pretend stress. You did it on purpose just to see what you would turn out. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do that right now. Let's make a list. What are your major interests? You may have heard this a whole bunch. One of my students was really, really good at building things and could put together things for Comic-Con. And in his 10th grade presentation to my class, he presented on the business he was trying to start. I was so excited for him because that isn't just for school. That is for him. And that is his interest. And it connects directly to the project we're doing. And we were blown away by how much thought he puts into this. But no one's ever seen it before. And probably could be a professional business down the road. When he presented in my class, we did it kind of like a Shark Tank. And we really helped him understand his pitch and whether we would really be customers of his on this product or not. He created YouTube videos about how he makes the garments that he does and puts them out for other people then to ask him to come and speak at their events. So shout out to Trail. And so, okay, are you thinking about what your major interest is? His was Comic-Con. What are you good at? When I was young, I played tennis. Nobody played tennis. I was actually pretty decent. I had had lessons and things. I didn't realize how much of talent that really was, that I could go beat people that never even held a racket, right? So if I got to choose something, then I would maybe choose that topic because it would be more something that came from my background that wasn't everyone else's. I definitely wanted to learn more. My parents were really good at knowing, let's buy him Tennis Magazine. Second Tennis Magazine came in. I read it from the front to the back. I looked in the back for stuff to buy. I priced rackets. I thought about which strings were the best. I knew every kind of grip tape. I had definitely major relationships with all the players because I'd read about their bios. And when I watched then, I saw it in such a different way. Okay, what is your one of those? Are you going to develop one for this coming project, for this year that you might be asked to have an idea that you're really going to like doing instead of feel like somebody else assigned it to you? Okay, so here's my list. I was really into music, still really am. Been a hard time during COVID because I haven't been able to have my buddies over and play. I really like gardening. That doesn't say gardening. Yes, it does. I thought we had another syllable in there. I really like writing. I really like presenting. But lately, I'm doing a little project called dog raising. And one reason I chose it is that I think students think research is something you only do in school. And what's really fun is it is certainly not. You do more research after you get out of school about what to do with your life and how to live and what to buy and who to know and where to go than you probably ever did while you were in school. What I've tried to show you today is research really is just part of something that happens to you as you get older. Here is what turned out after a lot of thought. If I were ready to go to class the next day and I needed to have my research question ready, here's what it would say. What efforts should be in place as a new dog owner to best ensure a happy home? Okay, from here I would drive to creating my thesis statement, my organization, and all of the collected evidence that I'm going to use to provide, my case. We will talk about that in future sessions. I hope today you've had a little bit of insight, kind of the secrets behind getting things figured out before you ever get started. Remember, sometimes you turn in that first draft and you knew you were lost and weren't sure of even what you were doing. This is a strategy that you could avoid that and then go back and look at your free write instead, your brainstorm, take the parts from it that then make you seem very clear about what you're trying to accomplish. I hope that's been some help to you. Again, you can use that in every class you'll ever take that involves a writing project, and I promise I actually have all the way back to 11th grade. Thank you, Ms. Schlossman.
Thank you, Mr. Odom, and thank you all for joining us today for ELA Tuesday. Tomorrow, Science Wednesday. We will see you then, and students, remember, keep learning throughout the day.